Hello viewers and welcome to a new episode of Trashtalk on Flying Circus, Chariot of Steel Edition, a series that's all about discussing the good and very bad of the many tanks and tank-like vehicles you can find in the Chariot of Steel expansion for Flying Circus. In today's episode, SRW Gletscher and Bergsteiger V.1. Let's start with the Gletscher first. Year introduced, 1596, served with, SRW Republic, Fokker, engine, Fleischmann F10, strengths, urban combat nightmare, weaknesses, for both sides. The Fokker kingdoms were notorious scavengers of armored vehicles, even by the standards of the powers of the Great War. They would even claim and refurbish vehicles written off by their allies. So it was that the isolated SRW Republic, Fokker's southern protectorate, received two Wandelburg Ausf 1s and a collection of spare parts in 1595. It was hoped the Republic's limited industry, concentrated around oil extraction, would be capable of copying the simple Wandelburg. However, the Republican army had yet to see action in Macchi at all and designers were given little guidance, resulting in a tank reverse engineered with a limited idea on how it would be used in practice. The result was laughable in its combat debut in 1596, with the 24 examples deployed at the Battle of Macchi failing to make a short advance by nightfall due to slow speeds and poor visibility. The tank was swiftly removed from front-line action and issued to occupation garrisons. Fitted with bulldozer blades and used as urban battering rams, civilians and partisans soon learned to fear the Gletscher. Despite its vulnerability up close, its impenetrable armor, rows of machine guns, building leveling cannon, and towering 4-meter height made it seem invincible. The Fiat 2000 is an Italian tank made during World War I. You can start laughing now, and by during, I mean the tail end of the war because its development cycle took so long. The war has ended when the only two prototypes finally came off the assembly line. Rather than scrapping these things, the Italians sent it to Libya instead, where it was quickly found that while the guerrilla force had nothing to damage it, let alone destroy it, they could just walk around it. Lessons learned from the Fiat 2000 pushed the Italians to the idea that they need more mobile tanks instead of big ponderous one, which is why they went the other end of the extreme and started making a lot of CV-33, a fast tank weighing barely 3 tons, totally not because the Italian military has no budget or anything, but these thing instead has inadequacy in a very different way. Also, in Himmelgard, there's a region called the Fiat Mountains. It's where people mine extremely pure gold from, which might or might not have been dragon poops. Remember, they lay golden eggs and is immortal. It's not that far of a stretch. These gold were then used to make thaler, with the gemstone in the center as a counterfeiting prevention. In essence, the intertown economy of Himmelgard is propelled by using fiat currency.
Critical hit.
With history like that, it's unsurprising that the Gletscher is the slowest tank in the entire book. Speed 1 is so atrocious. The only thing you can say about the Gletscher's mobility is that it can move. It also has decent torque, but terrible handling. Its armor profile of 333, however, is what makes it so powerful against infantry or anything lightweight, as almost nothing they have can hurt it reliably, from top to bottom, front or rear. Not even anti-tank mine can reliably take this thing out. A field gun will of course cut this tank down, but with 30 integrity, that will also take a while, so of course the crew will feel very safe in it. The reliability is okay, but this thing will eat fuel like nothing else, and while it is decently priced for a tank, its base upkeep and crew requirement will eat into your budget. The Gletscher is armed with the following: a turreted assault howitzer that can aim any directions and can delete buildings and lightly armored vehicles with ease. Getting line breaker mastery makes the howitzer vastly better, as well as 7 water-cooled machine guns, aimed in 7 directions. Needless to say, this thing is exceptionally cruel to infantry, in or out of cover, if it can ever reach them in time with its speed. As with most heavy tank, there's a mechanic with direct engine access, so the engine can be turned on or repaired from within just fine, but, again, with the need of 10 crew at max to run this thing, it will eat up your budget, though you might be able to cut down the machine gun crew to 4 and still have good coverage. The Gletscher also has 2 traits. First is dead zone. The Gletscher has all the guns but is blind as shit from its height and many other things. It can't see or engage anything within knife range, which is basically right next to the tank. The driver, the only crew with a hatch, can also only see directly forward due to how it is shaped. Meaning, if an infantry with a tank breaker got too close, you probably won't realize it until you are dead. And second, imposing presence. The Gletscher can inflict tank terror on infantry at close range instead of knife, but it won't inflict tank terror if anyone gets too close. Basically, this thing is a nightmare to infantry, until it gets too close, but you also wants to get close, because the assault howitzer has like no range, so, yeah no, if you are driving this thing, good fucking luck. As for how to deal with this thing, if you have big guns like field cannon, you will do just fine. If not, that's gonna be a problem. An infantry support cannon will bounce off a lot of the time no matter which direction you are hitting this thing at, unless you use can't miss, which you will probably have if you are a light tank commander. If you are commanding an infantry squad, just don't poke the hornet nest, let the tank deal with this thing, you will not survive it. Onto the modifications. Defensive fragmentation pack can be installed on the Gletscher and it is exactly what it sounds like, 4 times per routine. The fragmentation pack can be exploded to rip any infantry within knife range apart. However, again, anyone in the Gletscher is basically blind to anyone that gets too close, so you essentially have to guess whether there's anyone there or not, giving the GM a lot of chance to just screw with you, which is very funny. Finally, there's the Bergsteiger V.1. Year introduced, 1599, served with, Kingdom of South Loring, engine, SLW Ildico, strengths, no expense spared, weaknesses, no explosive shells. The Kingdom of South Loring had a great many things going for it. It had a well-developed industrial sector, brilliant engineers taking refuge from the war, and the government made money hand over fist acting as a tax shelter for war profiteers. What it didn't have was manpower, and as the war came to a close, it also began to run out of time. The kingdom invested their advantages into creating the most advanced weapons they could for when the war came to their mountain cities. Their aircraft are much sought after for this reason, but everything in their armory was of similar quality in preparation for a glorious last stand. The Bergsteiger V.1 was the primary tank of this army, one that had clearly learned every lesson of the Great War. It had heavy all-around armor, a high power-to-weight ratio, a unique high-velocity self-loading cannon in a turret, and was almost luxurious to operate. Conscious of casualties, it was both very survivable and easy to escape from. Ultimately, none of this equipment would see much use. Despite their cutting-edge aircraft, artillery, fortresses, and tanks, the kingdom would be overrun in a month by Fokker forces in 1599, their troops surrendered en masse, realizing that a glorious last stand still gets everyone killed. Based on this name that I will refuse to even attempt to spell, a tank that's basically only exist on napkin, which means that's about as much as I could even talk about it, the Bergsteiger is another hero tank, much like the Wachter, which means it is one excellent tank. It's not really fast, but has good torque and can turn well. Its armor profile of 432 and integrity of 28 will save your ass when you need it. Plus it has a reliable engine, good fuel range, but it is expensive as hell, with the same base upkeep of the goddamn Drachentotter. Why does it have such a high upkeep? Well, everything. Let's take a look at its traits first. Most of it, the Bergsteiger has supercharger, which lets it ignore high altitude penalty. This requires Horror of the Height supplement book, which now has sections on ground vehicle at high altitude, but essentially, your engine doesn't get less reliable and powerful at high altitude, which can be helpful whenever that comes up. Next there's crew amenities. The tank comes with intercom, temperature control, and gas filters, a bunch of basic upgrades that give your crew a whole new level of comfort in a terrible environment, and if the tank catches fire, there's a 50% chance that before you even do anything, the fire suppression system has already solved the problem, further extending your survivability. And of course, hero tank, you know what this does. The tank has to be crewed solely by an entire PC group, which will make it absurdly powerful, but it also means your entire group only has a single tank. Now, let's look at what else the tank has. Like the Wachter, the Bergsteiger needs a crew of 5, on top of everything else this tank has already. The commander has a wireless set to radio in others from long range, so already on the utility side, the Bergsteiger has like goddamn everything. As for weapons, the Bergsteiger has 2 water-cooled machine guns, one aiming forward and can be turned to the sides, and one at the rear too, giving plenty of coverage. And like the Wachter, it has a turreted cannon, a very special cannon, that might be the most lethal anti-tank weapon in the entire book. It's called a self-loading squeeze-bore cannon. A squeeze-bore cannon is an unusually small caliber cannon that fire a cannon shell of a larger caliber which gets squeezed down the bore, turning it smaller and making it faster, thus increasing their penetration. Naturally, however, shoving large thing into a small hole tends to wear it out faster. The barrel life of squeeze-bore cannon is vastly shorter than that of normal cannon, 5 times lesser as a matter of fact in some cases. This was a technology primarily used by Germany during World War II, because of course it's fucking Germany, but the technology did get leaked to the Allies eventually and got primarily used by the British in the form of Little John adapter on their QF 2-pounder cannon, and these dick jokes have to fucking stop. The reason why this technology didn't really exist beyond World War II is simple: there's no use for it. One of the primary limitation of anti-tank technology at that time is that making increasingly bigger and longer cannon is difficult, resulting in many tanks at the time having either a long but usually small caliber anti-tank cannon, or a short but large caliber cannon only good for slinging high explosive, or both, in many cases. People know bigger and longer cannons will eventually be possible. Squeeze bore is just one attempt of trying to make smaller caliber anti-tank gun better. It did, with too many disadvantages, and eventually larger tank cannon just overtake it and it is just not needed anymore. Anyway, for the Bergsteiger, the squeeze bore is the most dangerous cannon in the entire book. This cannon fire a 18 damage round with AP5, which can cut through most tank like butter, and remember, if an attack has higher AP than the tank, you have a very high chance of doing a critical hit which deals double the damage, meaning there isn't that many tank that can survive a hit from this thing. As for things that can survive at least 2 hits from this cannon, here's the problem: this cannon is also self-loading and can fire 2 rounds per attack. This thing could in fact set a Trashtalk on fire in 1 turn. The other good thing about this cannon is that unlike all other high caliber cannon, it has reload 3, meaning, you only need to narratively reload this weapons after 3 bursts of shells, which is also why there's only a single gunner manning the cannon without a loader. Sure, then you need to stay quiet for a turn before going gun blazing for another 3 rounds, but at that point, the enemy might be down by 3 tanks already. This cannon is positively murderous. The only bad thing about it is that it can only fire its unique armor-piercing shell and nothing else. No smoke, high explosive, anything else. This is a problem shared with real squeeze bore cannon too, which can only fire these weird AP shells with tungsten core that's very hard to manufacture. Another drawback it has, and it's a big problem because most of the time, a tank cannon is aimed at infantry to explode the hell out of them and not at tanks. So, for anti-infantry purpose, you will have to rely on the water-cooled machine gun, either on hull or the turret, which I forgot to mention before, or any pintle-mounted guns you have mounted on this baby. And as if that's not enough, this cannon also has a lead gun sight, so against moving targets, they will quickly find that they will be moving a lot less very quickly. As for how to deal with this thing if the GM is cruel enough to put it on the enemy side, good luck. Any vehicles without 5 armor on one facing will get cut down quickly. Any tanks with 4 frontal armor can still survive the onslaught by going hull down, but it also means you can't move much. Speedy light tanks will not be effective against this thing due to lead gun sight, so they might need to evacuate the scene or take cover. Infantry will be the star of the show against the Bergsteiger, as they will have a slightly easier time against it as it lacks high explosive shell. Slightly, because the Bergsteiger could aim 2, possibly 3, water-cooled machine guns in a single direction, and that's a lot of damage. Whether it's tank or infantry that's dealing the final blow, you will feel that it's gonna take a while to bring this thing down due to its fire suppression system, unless you did so much damage that the damn thing just exploded into pieces. The Bergsteiger has no modifications due to how rare it is. And that's basically it for these 2 tanks and the series. The dread-inducing SRW Gletscher that's less dangerous than it looks up close, usually, and the ranged murder that is the Bergsteiger V.1 with its tiny repeating cannon. It has been fun talking about these wonderful and sometimes or most of the time really shitty tanks and taking a deep dive into their histories, if there's one. Other than the tanks, the book also has a variety of support vehicles, and unlike tanks, a player group could technically have as many of them as possible. Even infantry squad could use them. You can look up on these when you want something on the support sides, or just design a catastrophe yourself. I won't be talking about these ones, they are simple to figure out. Anyway, it has been a great 5 months, and it's time to bring in a new series. That's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe and click that notification bell button. If you want to see the videos early as well as further support my channel, you can join in my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.